Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Afternoon, happy Friday. This is Marty Kaiser with another edition of our Real Estate Tidbits podcast. Hope all is well with everyone and looking forward to an awesome weekend. I thought today I'd do something different. For those of you that have been regular listeners, you might have caught on that my podcasts are pretty much spontaneous. I have a few topics that I like to review, but I don't have anything scripted. I just like to go in kind of unrehearsed and say what comes to mind. Occasionally that gets me into trouble. You can ask my wife about that. But other than that, I'm more of a spontaneous, unscripted person. One thing I hate about politics, for example, is that everything is so unscripted. I mean, it is scripted. You feel that there's no genuineness to what is spoken, and there's so many lies spoken. This last vice presidential debate we had, I just scratched my head. Things that were said, the same person had said something on that topic weeks earlier, totally opposite, and these were important topics. So anyway, enough about my disillusionment with politics. So today, I thought what would be interesting was what can happen in the day of a busy real estate broker. Today started off before I came in. I thought it would be a fairly routine day. I had a few different things scheduled, but it looked like a typical work day. I got into the office about 8 o'clock. I had a lot of paperwork to do. I had some callbacks to make. I had a 10 o'clock conference call to an out-of-state future customer. I had a noon appointment, and that was pretty much what was on the itinerary. One thing I've learned in all my years of real estate, and why I probably have a handful of gray hairs, is that you can't always predict what's going to happen in a given day in real estate, and it can't always be according to a firm schedule. There's a certain amount of unpredictability. In my opinion, you have to be flexible to be in real estate. You have to be willing to work somewhat erratic hours, and you have to be adaptable. At least with my customers, and I try to give personalized hands-on service at all times. People may want to see me, and they don't always give much notice. I probably get a little bit above average amount of people that walk in my office looking for me, because in the area where my office is physically located, which is in Hunters Creek, I've done a lot of business here, and so most people are quite well aware of me. And I think they kind of look at me as almost an acquaintance or a friend, because they've seen my signs, they've seen my marketing, they've seen my pictures, they've hopefully heard awesome things about me. And so we've kind of pre-established a relationship. So I do the best I can to accommodate, probably in some cases too much, so it creates a little bit more stress and unpredictability about me, but it's part of being in real estate, and it's part of doing what I call multitasking. One of the things that probably sets me apart from a lot of younger agents, I guess you could say, or less experienced, a lot of them have been trained, and I'm not saying this is good or bad, but you'll get their email and they'll have a message and they'll say they're unavailable. Some of them will say they don't return calls after 5 p.m. Some of them take complete nights off. They may take weekends off, and they don't feel it's that crucial to return inquiries. I, on the other hand, probably are more old school And if somebody wants to reach me within reason, I try to get back with them as quickly as I can. The only exception I make for that is, if I'm at dinner with my family or in a restaurant or something of that nature, then obviously I wait until that particular obligation is completed. But otherwise, people know if they need to reach me, I'm reachable. And I think that's important. I kind of equate that to a superior service in terms of comparing what I do to the medical profession. In the medical profession, if you have anything but an emergency, it's pretty much impossible to reach your doctor after hours. And you'll usually get a recording, and they'll say if it's an emergency, they'll have maybe another doctor or a partner on call. But trying to reach your personal doctor is almost impossible. And so a lot of times, if you really have something that's troubling or that needs immediate information disseminated, you're talking to someone that may know nothing about you, knows nothing about your medical history. Or myself, on the other hand, if people want to get a hold of me, whether it's an existing customer or a potentially new customer, I want them to talk to me. I don't want them to talk to my assistant or my administrative person, because that's not who the person has heard of, seen in marketing, or has hired. They've hired me, and they're going to get my personalized service and expertise. That's just how I go, and I'll never change. But anyway, to get back to the unpredictability and kind of what happened in terms of what I had in addition to what I mentioned about my itinerary for today, the first thing that happened was we had an offer that came in on one of our properties early this morning, and it was like a lot of customers, anxious customers, and they were hoping for a prompt response. So I got a call on that and chatted with the person that presented the offer, got a little bit more insight into the situation beyond what was on the contract, and then made plans to contact my customer to present the offer. So that was something, obviously, that we do quite frequently. Some offers are more complicated than others, and some take a lot more back and forth discussion. So that was one thing. Then the next thing that happened was we had an inspection on one of our properties, and the report came back this morning, and it had a lot of commentary and things that the inspector had found. The one thing that you'll find in dealing with inspections is they're very unpredictable, not only what the findings are, but how they're phrased by the inspector, and are they really defects or not. And the inspectors can make or break a transaction. The less diplomatic or the harsher that an inspector's comments are, the more challenging it is for the broker to kind of keep things afloat, calm the buyer down, and try to get a meeting of the minds between the seller and the buyer as to how the inspection will be handled. And I'll give you an analogy. Again, the medical profession's on my mind today, so I'll give you a medical analogy. You go to the doctor, maybe there's something that you're concerned about or the doctor's concerned about, so they run a test on a particular item. Okay, you may get one doctor that says, yeah, you have X, Y, or Z, no big deal. I see many of these. All we have to do is put you on an antibiotic possibly, or they may have to give you medicine for that. But it's not a great concern. It's just something that we need to control and monitor. So not that you're thrilled that you're going to have to get that, but you're at ease that it's not life-threatening, it's not going to affect the quality of your life, etc. Another doctor may find the same condition and may make it sound like, you're on death's doornail and it's really crucial and you need to do all these unusual activities, and you're going to have to go through just a lot of things that you were hoping not to go through. So obviously, one of those doctors may be more correct than others, but yet you had two completely differing perspectives. When it comes to an inspection, I found a couple things. Number one, some inspectors are alarmist. They'll put down a pretty, what I call docile or minor problem and make it sound like it's a major problem. Those same inspectors may have a 100-page report, because a lot of these inspections are kind of boilerplate and then they have to fill in specific information. And they may have every page filled out with a lot of negative information on things that are really minor, or maybe are beyond the scope of the inspection, or maybe they're cosmetic. So if a buyer reads that type of report, they're thinking to themselves, boy, this house has a major amount of problems. Why do I even want to deal with it? It's just not worth it. Or they may make extremely unreasonable requests of the seller because of the way their inspector painted a negative scenario. Other inspectors will couch those items differently. They may say it's a minor thing. They may give a maintenance recommendation to the buyer. They may say it's cosmetic and it's not really within the scope of the inspection. For example, let's say you're in a house that has carpeting, and maybe, the carpeting is in average condition, which is not uncommon for houses that have carpeting. Now, the listing agent obviously is aware of that carpet, and probably he or she has already discussed the carpet with their seller and has factored that into their pricing and marketing strategy. That being said, the carpeting is 100% visible, so it's not like there's something that the buyer has not seen. So when the buyer presented an offer on that house, they knew that the carpeting was average, and depending on the buyer's preferences, they may decide to replace the carpeting either with new carpeting or different type of flooring, whether it's tile that looks like wood, whether it's laminate, or whether it's regular ceramic tile. So the buyer has kind of factored that in. But the inspector that included the carpet was putting a cosmetic issue on his report or her report, and maybe couched the comments in a negative fashion that just created more of a negative posture in the discussions between buyer and seller. Another thing that I see with some inspectors are they will give personal opinions and put it right in the report. They're not really supposed to do it. They're supposed to look for things that are not in normal working condition, basically. I'll give you, for instance, that a lot of them do nowadays, and I personally don't agree with it. They'll put on the report that the buyer should have a termite bond on the house. Certainly not bad strategy. I would never tell somebody not to have a termite bond on their house, but it's not a requirement on any house, and probably 75 to 80% of the houses that I work with, whether I'm representing buyers or sellers, do not have a termite bond on them. The seller either didn't feel it was important or didn't want to spend the money for the termite bond. Usually it's one of those two things. Occasionally it'll be because they weren't aware they could get a termite bond. So they put that in the report, and let's say you had an overall okay report. It wasn't like a house with no defects, but it wasn't like a house that had defects that were going to deep six a contract. So now when the buyer sees that, of course, they'll ask, does the house have a termite bond? And then, of course, in my case, I would say no, because if my house had a termite bond, I would have put that in the marketing remarks. So now they've kind of created a negative psychologically with buyers. And when you're in the real estate business and you're dealing with a house, which is frequently your most expensive transaction that the average person makes, perception and how things phrased are so crucial. They can heavily influence making or breaking a transaction. I always explain to customers the first 30 seconds to a minute when you walk into a house sets a tone. So if you're the purchaser and the first 30 to 60 seconds are not exactly 100% favorable to you, it's going to start your showing off in a negative light, and you'll more likely not to pursue that house. By the same token, I explain that to my sellers. I say, we got to have the house looking pristine. You don't want somebody to eliminate your house over really minor stuff because A, you're not a good housekeeper, there's clutter in your house, maybe you have a pet and there's a little bit of a pet odor. Whatever the case may be, I try to make sure that my sellers don't have those issues so that their house doesn't get eliminated in the first 60 seconds that a buyer looks at it. By the same token, if you're a customer that's decided you want to interview a few agents before you hire them, whether you're a potential seller or buyer, a lot of times the first impression is going to override what the agent knows. For example, in the first 60 seconds, if you don't get a favorable impression of that agent, regardless of how skilled the agent is, how much they know, you're less likely to hire them. Maybe you don't like their appearance. Maybe you don't like how that they don't look you in the eye. Maybe you don't like their handshake. Maybe you don't like their lack of enthusiasm for your home. Could be a variety of factors. This doesn't necessarily mean that they're a good or a mediocre agent, but it does mean why you may or may not hire them. So the point of all this information that I'm disseminating is first impressions are crucial. So that was another item on my unscheduled itinerary. My third item, which really juxtaposed a lot of my activities today, was I had two future out-of-state customers walk into the office unannounced. So here I'm juggling these different things, and I've got these out-of-state customers walk in. They're customers that I've had ongoing conversations with, and I knew they were coming into town in the next few days. And my instructions to them had been, well, notify me when you're in town. We'll make a day and time to visit at your house and finalize and review everything. The thing with these gentlemen, they had already agreed to hire me to sell their house. It was a house that they don't reside in year-round, and they knew it needed some straightening up and sprucing. And so I was going to walk through them again on that, along with going over my strategy for the house in greater detail and going over all the new paperwork, because as you know from listening to my podcast the last 6 to 8 weeks, all the new real estate procedures started August 6th. So you can probably blame me for being too detail-oriented, but I like to go over not only the paperwork, but the logic behind some of the changes, about the new options sellers have with potential compensations to buyers' agents, about the new paperwork contracts that buyers' agents have to have signed by the potential buyer, things of that nature. So that took a while, and of course, this was a big event for these gentlemen. They had never sold a home in Florida. They're residents of one of the islands, Puerto Rico, so the procedures are a little bit different. So anyway, it took a while, but I didn't make them wait very long because I don't like waiting for professionals that I deal with, so I try not to have people wait for me when I can avoid it. And so we took care of that. Then I had to take care of my out-of-state customers that I was handling by Zoom call, because it was a property that these out-of-state customers are going to be listing in Orlando. And they had gotten my name as a referral, but they were doing their own due diligence and interviewing a few agents. So this was their first meeting with me. So obviously they had to get to know me. I tried to cover a number of bases, but, tried to limit the initial time because they told me that, they were busy. So we tried to limit the phone call to 30 to 40 minutes, which for some people is long. And so I had to take care of that. After that, I had an appointment to go up to Dr. Phillips and put a listing on the market. I had to finish getting that listing along with my assistant, input it, and get it up and running this afternoon. So those are just some of the things that have taken place up to this point. It's now, today it's Tuesday early afternoon. Friday it's early afternoon. And those are the activities that I've accomplished today. And I still have other things I have to do before I call it a day today. So the point of this story, and hopefully you found this entertaining and or interesting, is that some days are unpredictable, and you're going from one task to the other, and you're kind of juggling a bunch of balls, and you want to make sure you give everyone that you're interfacing with superior attention and service. Other days are quieter, and you don't have all these things going on. You may return a few calls, you may have one appointment or two, you may do some prospecting, you're doing follow-up on deals that you have in process. So you always have things to do, but some of the days are a lot more stressful, and you have multiple activities, and some of those are unplanned. So I bring all that up not only to give you insights into the day of a busy broker in the Orlando area, but also there's a perception by a certain number of people that are residents that real estate agents are overpaid, and B, that a lot of them could use maybe a better course in ethics and integrity. And I've learned that for a couple reasons. Usually, if you talk to a for sale by owner, for example, and you're able to chat with them, and you're obviously introducing yourself and hoping they would consider you to assist in the sale of their home. One of the things that I try to discuss when we chat is I'll usually ask them in certain ways as to why they've decided to try to sell it privately. So I find that I always get one or two answers. The one commonality is, I want to save money. Well, it's true that they'll probably save money when they're not paying a realtor compensation or a commission. But what's not true in most cases is they don't have anywhere near the success rate when they're for sale by owner. And at least with my customers, they sell it for significantly less as a for sale by owner than I'll sell it for being their broker. So at the end of the day, they put more money in their pocket when they utilize my services, and they have less stress, and I have to do all the running around and the showings, etc. But nonetheless, that's one of the answers I get. The second answer, and kind of the more interesting answer, is a lot of them have had a bad experience with an agent. They've either been unsuccessful in selling the home, they didn't like the agent's attitude, they felt the agent wasn't hardworking enough, they felt the agent's communication skills in keeping the customer fully apprised as to the progress of their property wasn't very good. or they felt the agent really didn't know that much. And I find that interesting. They also sometimes fell out about the agent's lack of integrity or only interested in making a sale, not interested in really the customer. And I have to admit, from my knowledge of fellow agents, some of those traits, unfortunately, are true. It's like any industry, there's skilled top-level agents, and there's agents that aren't so good. So that is why it's so important to carefully listen and compare the agents, what they're saying, what their recommendations are, what their pricing strategies are, what their marketing strategies are, what their track record is in a particular geographic area or neighborhood, et cetera. And an interesting statistic that you're going to find is 15% of the agents make 85% of the income. So think about that. That means that 85% of the agents are fighting for 15% of the income, where 15% of the agents are making 85% of the income. Well, why is that the case? Because in most cases, the 15% of the agents that make in the income are superior to the 85% that are not. Very interesting statistic, and it's true in a lot of sales venues that there's a much lower percentage of agents that do the majority of business. Accordingly, if you read statistics, if you Google and see what does the average agent make, the average agent really does not make a livable wage. They're struggling. So when you deal with a struggling agent, they're worried about making a sale, and they're worried about paying their family bills. And so unfortunately that comes across. It's kind of a quiet desperation where the busy agents, they know they're going to do business because they do quality and they have a lot of referrals and they're well known. So those are some things that I find interesting and are things that you should consider in your future real estate travels. Another thing is people in Florida, we used to make this joke, more people have real estate licenses than have driver's licenses, because a lot of people get into the business and they think it's going to be an easy way to make money. Well, it's not. And if you've heard me, you see that whether you like me or not, I know what I'm talking about, and I work hard. And I've been doing this a long time. And the reason I've been doing it a long time, hopefully, is because I'm good at it, so I'm still in business and I enjoy what I'm doing. But a lot of agents struggle, and you see people come and go in real estate quite often. Some of your, what I call institutional companies, some of the brands that are more well known to you, they have tremendous turnover. So somebody might say they're working with ABC, which is a national company, and you might think to yourself, well, they're working for this big company, so they must be good. Nothing could be further from the truth as a generalization, because they may be a newer agent. They may be an agent that's struggling. And some of your bigger national companies, one of their benchmarks is agent count. So they aggressively are looking for agents 365 days of the year through various methods. Some are more scientific than others. Some have a better skills assessment process. Some have a better interview process. But at the end of the day, they have a pretty high turnover rate in a lot of these companies. It's kind of like, I'll hire 10 and I'll hope 3 are successful. And every company has their own percentage of what they consider acceptable. But I can tell you that a lot of the big companies operate like that. So if you're a consumer, you don't want to get one of those 7 out of 10 people that are not going to be successful, because you're not going to get the same level of representation. And people, unfortunately, too often try to lump people together. They say, oh, any real estate agent or realtor can do that. And nothing can be further from the truth, in my opinion. So these are just some things that I thought you might be interested in giving some thought to. If you have questions about these or you don't agree with me, feel free. I always love to hear people with contrary opinions to me. Having a healthy, respectful discussion is always fun. You can reach me pretty much anytime, as you've heard during this podcast, at 407-595-9700, either via text or telephone, or you can reach me at my email in marty@floridasells.com. Have a great day. Have a safe weekend. Marty Kaiser out.